Shall we go live?
Yes.
We have apologies for absence received. So, actually, welcome everybody to our meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So we have apologies from Andrew Witsinski. Sorry, and apologies if I haven't pronounced his name correctly. And the Mayor sends his apologies. He is likely to be here, but it will be late.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know Mark Morehouse is in a District Council meeting.
Ah, thank you.
So I think I'll pass on his apologies.
Thank
for
you.
also, I just do not disturb. So set things to silent. Right, declarations of interest. To receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest from members in respect of business to be transacted on the agenda. I don't think we have any here. But just confirm we are quo rate, aren't we?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Minutes. To receive and approve the minutes of the Monkswell Nature Reserve Committee held on 2nd of December 2024 and to consider any matters arising from those minutes not covered elsewhere in this agenda. Decision required. I read through them, I didn't see anything that it was a fairly simple set of minutes. And if we can have somebody, I'll propose Councillor second. Yeah. And Councillor Pennington is seconding, and if we can have a vote on, that's, I think that is carried.
Yes.
Unanimously. This is when we're right. Public participation. A 20-minute session. Now, I don't see any members of the public, so I'm not going to read everything out. If we can go straight on to...
We confirm, Chair, no requests.
No request to speak as well. So, right. In the Woodsmith Parish Council meeting, we race to sometimes to go through these. We're going through now to the report from the Monkswell Nature Reserve Warden. Members to receive a report from the Monkswell Nature Reserve Warden that spans the period from the end of November 2024 to the end of February 2025. Members are invited to receive the report. So we have the report here, and over to the Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a fairly brief report. First of my apologies for not being here at the last meeting. I was on safari in Tanzania at the time.
Oh, great. Very nice too.
And then came back to a very cold, damp winter. I paid a few visits in the interim up until this report here is up until the end of February. The main issue is, or the main issues, still relate to the overall major management issues to do with the reserve. I know the leak in the sluice is actually an agenda item for later on, so perhaps we can return to that in a moment. A year ago, this committee agreed the capital works, excavation of the new scrape, new hide, etc. Progress has been very slow, to the point of I'm not sure what progress has been made, in fact.
Really?
Some months ago, I was saying, originally the work was originally scheduled for September of 2024 last year. It became obvious that wasn't going to happen, so I was thinking and saying to various people, well, September 2025. I now wonder whether even that's going to be possible. Because it does seem to be taking an inordinate amount of time to get things done. Linked to that is the absence of an overall management plan for the reserve, which I have flagged up on a couple of occasions before. It's now 8 years out of date. There's no management plan. We're working on an ad hoc basis without any overall agreement as to what the reserve is for, how it should be managed, how it could be managed, or whether what was the management practice in the past is any longer appropriate. It's those sorts of things which need sorting out. Perhaps we can return to perhaps one or two of these after I've just done this report. I'm sure councillors may want to make some comments, but I hope so. Item 4 in that section, the Environment Agency, they've been working, as they said they would, all winter, doing more of their work along the river embankment. They've cleared more vegetation along the toe, which is the base of the embankment on the river side. It's what they call the toe. It's an engineering term, I understand. Slightly more concerning is that they've replaced all the wood and wire mesh fences that were around the sluices. Now, when most councillors won't be aware of this, but when the Environment Agency worked on the area, doing their flood defence work back in about 2013, about that time, 10 or more years ago, there was a considerable delay in this council accepting the land back from the agency. There were a lot of legal toing and froing going on because the council received legal advice that the agency hadn't left the land in a safe state. And eventually, after several years of negotiation, when the reserve remained closed to members of the public, those issues were resolved. But one of the key issues was the fact that the Environment Agency sluices were considered to be not protected enough. Sorry, let's put it the other way around. That members of the public were not protected enough by the way that the Environment Agency had left the sluices. And one of the things that the town council did was to install some extra wooden fencing around each sluice with close mesh to stop people, particularly children, clambering over the Environment Agency fences, or indeed going around the edges of fences and falling into the sluice. Because if they did so, they would drown. What the Environment Agency appeared to have done is to have ripped out all the town council's fencing that was put in there after we had, I'll say we, the council, sorry, after the council took professional advice from a health and safety consultant. And one of the things on her list was you must protect these sluices because the existing fencing isn't good enough. So taking that advice, the council paid for these new fences to be put in. And they've been there without any comment from the agency until this winter. The agency have now taken all those fences out and replaced them with wooden fencing, which are nowhere near as extensive as the council's ones. In other words, they cover a smaller area around each sluice. I mean, a couple of the cases, and in particular the main sluice, the one that leads into the River Stour, it's perfectly possible for anybody to walk around the edge of the wooden fence and stand on the edge of the concrete, right on the edge of the water. And if the tide is running and someone falls in there, they're not going to get out. So I raised that because it is quite a serious item of health and safety, it seems to me. And it may be that the council may wish to contact the Environment Agency and say, are you prepared to take responsibility if a member of the public falls in here? Because in fact what they've done is that they've reduced the protection that's given to passers-by. I think I know the reason they've done it. It's because bramble and other stuff was growing up between the fences that the council put in around the sluice and the sluices themselves. And that meant that the agency people weren't able to access the sluice quite so easily as they can now. But nonetheless, there is a problem. I have taken some photographs of what the problem is. I've not had time to print them out or send them, but I'll send one to you, Jim, if you like, so that people can actually see what the issue is. So that I suggest needs looking at.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
You said it'd been replaced with wooden fences.
Yeah.
Time to go there. Are the wooden fences sufficient, even though they don't go as far, to provide some protection to the public, or are they the sort of thing that any 4-year-old would enjoy climbing?
This is the fence that they've sorry, can I get that? I might always pass it around.
Ridiculous fence, isn't that?
Yes.
To get through that.
That's a typical section of the fence, the fencing that they put in. So there's no chain mesh across between the wooden palings. There's no barbed wire across the top as there was on the fence that the council put in. And as I say, it is possible to walk round, to easily walk round the end of the fence, and get straight into the sluice, into the wall.
I think we'll have to get these health and safety people there. I'll pick up ourselves, won't we?
Yes.
Because that's what we before we shut the reserve, because they put those new sluices in, and you could drop to 10, 15 foot down onto the concrete. And they were so dangerous there, and we had to shut back for 3 years.
Yeah, took a long time.
And then we had to buy the fences as well to make it longer. So they shouldn't have done that without contacting us.
No.
Because they could make us liable, couldn't they? There's an accident.
I would.
I'm not quite sure.
I don't know. Is it something in terms of obviously liability is a key? Well, the key thing is nobody dying.
No, not
The
yet.
second thing is liability.
Yeah.
Would we be able to restore the mesh to their fence to at least restrict children getting through? Because that's the first thing I would see.
Yeah, that could be done.
And I think we would need to actually have advice on whether we then became liable for their fence.
Yeah. I've never been clear in what the respective legal situation is. I mean, obviously the Environment Agency have responsibility for maintenance and maintaining the riverbank and also the Monk's Wall section. But they don't own the land, I take it. I mean, I assume that's still owned by, as part of Pfizer's deal with donated to the council. But where the liability comes, I don't know. I mean, if someone did fall in and drown because they were now able to easily get past one of these fences, whether the Environment Agency would be in a position of being legally responsible or the council is not clear.
I would have thought it was important as well to get proper safeguard to it, not just a mesh, that any, to make sure it's properly safe for children rather than just putting up a sort of secondary type barrier to it, because kids can get through anything like that, can't they? They can pull it down, they can do anything they like, and the kid's life is more important than,
Yeah. I was just wondering is there an easy solution to the problem which apparently caused this, namely the brambles between the two fences?
Well, now they've moved their fences so much nearer to the actual sluice itself. There isn't. And what they will do is that they'll get their contractors who cut the grass. I'm sure they'll now be cutting over where the brambles were. It's a bit difficult to explain. It's as if they've, the fences that the council put in, the town council put in, covered a bigger area around the sluice. What the agency have done is they've taken those fences out, and the fence like the one I've just shown you in that picture is now been brought in much closer to the actual concrete edging of the sluice. And the bit in between the two fences was where the brambles had sprung up because the grass mowers who work for the agency obviously weren't able to get in there over the last 10 years. Now they will be able to, and they'll be able to mow right up to the line of the new agency fences. But it will also mean that youngsters or members of the public generally will now be able to go right up to those wooden fences and are literally looking over straight into the water.
No, I was just going to ask, who does the Environment Agency report to anybody about the work that they've done?
No. They had a meeting with councillors, what was it, best part 2 years ago, not autumn last year, autumn before.
I think it might have been actually.
Yeah.
It was after I arrived.
In which, because that was when they made this big announcement that the status of the place in their terminology had been changed. It was now officially what's called a raised reservoir, and that meant that they had to look at how the place, the riverbank was maintained and managed, and that's when they came along and said we're going to thin out all the trees along the base of the river, base of the embankment. We're going to, there were various other things they were going to do. I can't remember offhand whether they said we will be looking at the fences around the sluice. I know they did complain about the fact that the council had put lifebuoy stations along there.
Yeah, piece of memory.
As they said, if you put a lifebuoy station with metal posts going in, you puncture the plastic netting that's buried about a foot down in the soil. And in the event of a tidal surge, the water would go through that plastic netting and wash the bank off. At which I am.
Do we have a contact in the Environment Agency to approach them?
Yeah, there's, I'm sure I can't remember his name, but we do have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we pass it on to you to get in contact?
Darryl, isn't it? Darryl Price.
Darren and Ian.
Yeah. And Ian Nunn is I think this is going to be above his paper, below his paper.
Yes.
But Darryl, I think, is the person.
But to basically clarify our concern about obviously liability, safety, and whether there's an option for them to upgrade the fences so that kids can't get through.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the liability will obviously get a little bit messy.
Yeah, that's what we had before, because they just did, if you go down by the Black Sluice and walk down the other side of the river, there's big sluices there, they just got through bars across. I think that's what they're legally obligated to do, but because we've got the nature reserve, we could have, it's our land, isn't it, as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of trouble with them before, but we ended up putting the fence in, the town council ended up putting the fence up.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I would imagine because it's our land, it would be our liability.
Well, now we've spoken about it, yes, and it's been we're aware of it.
Yeah.
So it becomes.
Sometimes it's better not to fence, because you look at the Riverside Green, that's not fenced at all, is it? Well, the quay's not fenced. Once you start putting fences up, you miss liability in a sense. So sometimes it's best just to leave it and say common sense prevails, but it's difficult in this part of nature reserve.
Yes. Yes.
It just struck me as being odd that we've gone back exactly 10 years
Yeah,
to what the situation was in 2015. We had obviously different personnel sat around the table having exactly the same discussion. We've got to do something about the Environment Agency fencing.
Yes. So as a first step from your report, this part of your report, town clerk will be you're away from that, aren't you? So
I'll hear from another week. Yeah.
another week.
Yeah.
To at least start that contact
Yes.
and say there is concern over the fences and potentially have a meeting, even for somebody to come here.
Yeah.
Looking at this, walk around.
Yes, yes. Well, I was actually going to suggest maybe we could have our next meeting there. Actually, on at Monk's Walk. Yeah, it'd be a slight problem with the recording, but we can. I'm sure we can work our way around that. And the weather, yes. Yeah, weather. Yes. So we've interrupted you. Carry on.
Yeah. What other items? Nothing. Beavers, they're still there. They're helping the Environment Agency thin out the trees. They seem to like willow trees, and they're coming across from Gays and Swords up the riverbank onto the Monkswell side, and they're taking out a sample of trees that are growing along the base of the riverbank, which is quite interesting. No great problem. Work that I've been doing recently, I've been mostly tidying up and clearing at the entrance to the Stoner Copse, which got very, very overgrown. It's not open to the public, that section of the reserve, not at the moment anyway, but it was looking a real mess. And so I've been doing bramble clearance up there. Visitors to the reserve, light but increasing use, I think is probably the phrase I like to use. The dog walker, Dee, you were saying to me.
I'm not convinced that he's stopped coming onto the reserve. I haven't actually been going because the dark nights and the weather's been so cold, so I haven't been going at his usual time when he comes. He usually comes about 5 o'clock, something like that, between 4 and 5. But there is a definite path between the fence to the boatyard and the main reserve, and there's also footprints in the mud on both sides of the fence and the gate. So although I haven't seen him, I think he might still be going on to the reserve. But now that the evenings are lighter and the weather's improving, I should be going out there more. So if I get more evidence, I'll get
Thank you. Yeah, we just literally had the same issue at Carriers Meadows. We've just taken steps to try and secure that. So we can probably do the same here. I think I'll speak to Julian about it and we'll,
I mean,
thank you.
Just on the subject of dog walking, and Dee raised a query with me the other day, because you met a dog walker on the footpath that comes from the Stoner end across the farmland. Everyone know what I'm talking about? Before you, that section, the first section that goes across the farmland, before you actually get to the reserve, well, that's outside the reserve. And therefore it's not covered.
Opposite the industrial estate.
Opposite the industrial
estate.
estate.
That first field.
So anyone who goes, although there are signs right on the roadside by the kissing gate saying nature reserve, the reserve doesn't start, of course, until you get 200 or 300 yards down that track. So anyone walking a dog up that footpath is perfectly, as far as I can understand, perfectly within their rights to do so. Because the public space protection law, the PSPO, whatever it's called, doesn't actually cover that section anymore. But they are not supposed to take their dog beyond the 5-bar gate onto the reserve property. So I thought it was not an interesting little thing to be aware of.
But I don't think that path's a public right of way, isn't it?
It's not a public right of way, it's a permissive footpath. In other words, the farmer has permitted people to go onto it, but at any time on permissive footpaths, the landowner can withdraw permission. So it's not a public right. There are no public rights of way around Monk's Wall at all. I remember having this conversation a few years ago with someone who got a bit shirty about something right. And they said, well, it's a public right of way, I can do what I want. I said, well, actually,
As far as access
it's
tracks,
not a
isn't
public
it?
right of way.
It's just access for the farmers to the fields.
Yeah. But the riverbank isn't a public right of way, nor is the top of Monk's Wall a public right of way. None of it is. It's not. In other words, if you were to go to Kent County Council and the Highways Department and look at their maps, you would not see those anywhere they're designated PROW, because it isn't. I think those are the major issues, but I skimmed over the thing about the rather concerning lack of progress on these major issues. It's almost exactly a year, February of last year, this committee agreed.
We've got to go back to that way.
Yes.
If you remember, this is the planning commission. I was in touch with the Environment Agency, and they said yes, that's fine. We can't foresee it properly what you're planning to do there, but you'll need to get planning permission first. Then I believe the council has found someone.
So,
Is it Finns?
yes, so there has been contact with Finns, but it's much more complicated than we first thought, Ken. I think that's the problem. So Julian has been working on it, but he's had other priorities, and I'm sorry it hasn't progressed further. But there are lots of projects at the moment. He's working, flat out. We've got a lot of things we're having to tackle. So this is just one of those projects.
Right.
But he has had a conversation with Finns again, because they're going to get quotes for a topo, because that is apparently what will be needed for doing this engineering operation to get the planning application. So we've had the quotes, so I've got to do further reports, or Julian has, for both of us, because it looking like now it's going to be many thousands of pounds before we can get the planning application in. It could be something in the region of £15,000 on top of the Finns quote, and that's just because of all the surveys and things that will be needed to actually get the planning application. So what Julian suggested, he's on holiday this week, but he said Finns have agreed to meet him on site, and obviously we'd like you to be there as well, to meet with Julian and Finns. And then early engagement with the Environment Agency, Finns said is essential. So obviously before people commit to spending that money, I think that these conversations need to be tackled, in a formal nature. So that was just to let you know that there has been work done, but obviously, because Finns as well are only the planning consultant, there will be an architectural aspect of the work needed. So that's where the money's going to have to be spent from the months or lecture reserve if members agree to it.
Right.
I think the process is more complicated than anyone first.
Well, it wasn't like this before. I think Julian made it more complicated than what it is.
Well, no, I think we went ahead and did it before without any permissions. I think that's.
No, we did do it through the district.
Well,
Building other scrapes.
But
it was verbal rather than...
yeah.
But we had asked permission though. Well, that's just done on the back.
But
This is the third one.
Sorry. What was the 5,000?
So Finns quoted last year. I think it was. Yeah, so that's what Julie said. We're looking at something in the region of £15,000 on top of the Finns quote. I don't actually have the cost for Finns in front of me, but it hasn't increased since last year. So they've said that the price would be the same for their services.
So
I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what that was.
So the 15,000
will be for all the topo and the surveys that are needed. You're going to probably need things like looking for newt surveys, and I don't know the terminology for all of them, but Finns, the planning consultant, she has had conversations with Julian about this and said it will need surveys and things. and it's likely to be in the region of about £15,000. So I think before, I do the reports and commit to it, obviously I'm going to need lots of information for the reports. So Julie suggested meeting out on site with you
Right.
and Finn's planning consultant, and then we need early engagement with the Environment Agency to make sure that they're on board with what's proposed as well. Okay, so there is some progress, but it's looking a bit more complex than we first thought. Sorry, did you want to finish your report review?
I think I probably have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit alarming that we're looking at now.
We'll revert back to your comment about the management plan.
Yes.
In terms of the management plan, can you advise us where we should go with this? Well, I would imagine it might well fall on your shoulders.
The existing management plan was drawn up by Mark Chandler, who's a chartered surveyor who works for Finns, and he used to come to this committee regularly. A large part of that management plan, and the reason that he was asked to do it, is because a large part of it was bound up with countryside stewardship and basic payment scheme payments, which the reserve attracted. That is now ceasing to be an issue because the basic payment scheme is more or less finished altogether, and the stewardship scheme for the reserve finishes, I think, next June. So there was an enormous amount of technical stuff that he did that made it a very detailed and lengthy management thing. I'm more than capable of writing a management plan for the reserve based on my knowledge of the place, and also having written management plans for nature reserves for other places as well. If I was entrusted to draft something out on that, then I'd be happy to do that.
Could you, for the next meeting, provide us with a quote just for that?
There has been a quote provided previously, which I'm just trying to check back, because I think that the issue was that there were a few items that covered amongst all given to members, and they said they couldn't make decisions because they didn't have sufficient information. So I need to go back to the minutes and actually check whether or not there was further information on Ken's proposal, because I know you have already quoted Ken.
I did come up with, I've got to be sensitive here. As you know, you employ me as the warden. The hourly rate for being warden is something less than the minimum wage. It's remained unchanged for 5 or 6 years. Writing a management plan, that's a separate issue, but I'll just throw that in. Writing a management plan is, I suggest, a different order of things. It's a professional level of operation. So I think it's reasonable to ask you to consider a larger amount of reimbursement or something like that.
Yes.
But having said that, I'd be talking probably in the order of several £100 if you were to put this out to a professional ecologist. Then you'd be looking at thousands.
Yes. No, I think we appreciate that, and your quote would actually be looked at, obviously very, we would support it most likely, very possibly. And within the management plan, obviously we need a warden. Would you be able to include in that your fees and proposal for fees?
Yes.
Because then we can deal with, because if you're being paid essentially less than minimum wage, something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
And so within the management plan it would include, for example, an annual review to maintain
I'd be happy to do
a
that.
correct rate.
I mean, the way that I would envisage it would be that I would come up with a draft, obviously, because it's not, it's is for you and full council to accept the plan. The way I would envisage it would be to come up with nothing too complex and whatever, but also to some idea of costings and also options. You know, I mean, there are certain things about the reserve, you know, that my view has changed. For example, I think there is scope for quite a large area which could be tree planted. Whereas previously, if you'd asked me this several years ago, I'd have said, you know, over my dead body, that there are opportunities there. I think there are also opportunities for opening up footpath areas for members of the public, to encourage more people to go there. But the more people that go there, I think it could take a lot of people. Anyway, if you're happy with me to start
Can we just do a vote on this? Can somebody propose? Well, basically proposing that the current warden does a management plan covering the next 5 years, but to include fees, costs,
Review of salary,
yes, review of salary, and you to bring that to the next meeting, and we can agree and then pass that through to full council. So, somebody to propose. We have Lynn proposing, and Covington seconding, and if we can just vote on that, so we're all voting for that. And now, was there anything else in your report that should be we should look at? The leak. Oh, that's coming next.
Yes.
Yes, that's.
I just wanted to ask at some point about housing development. I know you wrote to the district council.
Oh yes.
Expressing some concerns, and I wondered if anything about this.
Because we've spoken about the planning issue of the area of the junction going into the proposed housing, and the area includes where the orchids are.
Yeah. The latest I heard about that was a month or two ago, and I understand that application has been withdrawn for constructing the entrance into the housing unit. So it looks as if, I think I picked that, I can't remember where I picked it up, but I'm sure I haven't imagined it.
Yeah.
But I think they've withdrawn the application. For whatever reason, I don't know. But it means presumably they will access, when they start with it, they'll access from the roundabout, which is the same access to Discovery Park, up to the garage.
Chair of the planning committee.
I don't think they fit the reserve.
Right.
So I think the problem, as far as I understand it, has gone away.
At the moment.
At the moment.
They have to get some
Right.
Hope springs eternal.
If we can go on to number 6, sluice repair update. Town clerk to share a verbal report on the progress with investigating the repair of the faulty sluice gate for Monkswell Nature Reserve.
Thank you, Chair. So, Julian has shared an update with me. So, finding engineers to look at the sluice gate, which is a specialist sector, has proved a very difficult task. However, he will be meeting a structural engineer from BSF next week, and he has experience with other projects with them. He's also going to meet an engineering company next week who repair sluice gates, and they have third-party consultancy design team that will instruct to produce any calculations required. Yes, so just returning to the sluice gate, also Rhino engineers are going to visit the sluice gate, and there should be another update from them shortly. So he has got a couple of companies now that are going to investigate and come up with quotes so we can actually then, even if we get 2 quotes, we can put the report together. So yes, so there's progress with that as well.
Good. Yeah. I did look at the problem day before yesterday, and it is worsening. The water, I mean, it's not a sluice gate problem, because there aren't any gates on the sluice, it's just these horizontal aluminium bars that stop the water. The problem is the water is going underneath the concrete structure of the sluice. It's undermining the actual concrete. And it flows both ways. When the tide comes in, some water is coming in through off the river and forcing its way under the sluice in one direction. But most of the water is the water that's back ponded on the reserve, and the pressure of it has found a way through the clay underneath the sluice. But that pressure is a constant flow of water pouring out of it. And as I said in my notes, that sluice is the single most important thing on the entire reserve in terms of managing the water level. If we can't control the water levels, the whole rationale for the reserve as a wetland is compromised. It's stronger than that. So it does need doing.
Rather than getting the full water pressure to that sluice, would it be possible to install some weirs further up so it breaks the water pressure down?
Yeah, well that would.
So if you put like 2 weirs further up,
Yeah.
it'd help retain the pressure back to the pond, and further down, then it'd be less weight of water on the actual sluice.
Well, I've often thought over the years that to have more sluices or weirs inside the reserve would be a good idea. But I've never voiced that because there were always other things.
No, I think that's what it needs though, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I think we need to put a couple of weirs in there,
Because
take the water pressure off.
Well, that's by the management plan.
yeah, absolutely.
Because it goes in the next
Yeah.
year or so, otherwise it's all going to
I mean, if these engineers are coming to have a look at the thing next week, perhaps they'll come up with quite a simple solution. It may simply be that they'll say, well, all you need to do is to get a digger in, pull the earth away and expose the hole that's going underneath, and shove a big slab of concrete down over the hole at each side. Maybe it's something as straightforward as that. The worst case scenario is that they'll say, well, unfortunately, your entire sluice
It's rubbish,
has been undermined by the water. You're going to pull the whole thing out. Well, I think that sluice cost about £18,000 when the council bought it 9 years ago. So that would be quite a hefty whack if we had to replace it. Okay. Well, we must have control over the water level. Otherwise it's not going to be a wetland. It's just going to dry out. It'll be a wasteland, not a wetland.
And it is our duty, it's the council's duty to ensure that's sluice.
As an essential management tool to maintain that as a wetland, there's no other way of doing that.
Years ago, it was just a flat pasture land here for cows. It used to flood in the winter months.
Yes.
And they put a big riverbank round. So they were just ditches and dikes, but then we decided that we wanted to have wetlands there, so we started putting the scrapes in. So when we had the scrapes in, and then get the bird life in, and that's when I think Martin Griffiths, the principal, just put his own sluice, and we had permission on the north ending bit. We just put the sluice with planks in, but then
There
we
was
put a new one in.
Yeah, I mean, when I took over as warden, I don't know how many years ago it was, 7, 8 years ago, there was a derelict wooden sluice in place. I mean, it was just big timbers, but it was completely useless. It had rotted and fallen apart. But it was in the same position as the current sluice is, controlling. There's only one way that water can get in and out of the reserve, and it's through the Environment Agency sluice that they put in the riverbank, and then the water can come through there, it goes through a dog leg, and then it enters the ditch system on the entire reserve. And it's at that dogleg where we, the council, control the water level, that whole thing. It may, I mean, the simplest solution would be if someone comes along and says, well, it's a basic, simple problem, you know, get a digger in, pull the earth away so you can see where the size of the hole is, and block it up with a slab of concrete or a couple of heavy paving slabs, turn it sideways on, and you block the hole. That would be the simplest thing, a few £100.
Would it only be
Sorry.
would that risk be only temporary?
Well, I think there might, I mean, I could foresee how it could be engineered to make it more, less temporary, by putting more earth revetments up against it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what the, you know, if you go out onto the marshes and look at sluices, you see that the environment agency and the inland drainage board, they often build up the banks around the sluices with sandbags, except they're not sand, they're full of cement, and they stick those on the earth walls and the sides of the ditches to give extra reinforcement. No, it's not rocket science, it's sluice science.
So there will be a financial impact on this. So are we expecting to be able to delay any decisions or any passing the buck up to the council to approve by the next meeting? This isn't going to be an urgent thing.
Well, let's put it this way: the main reason for having control over that sluice is so that you can lower the water level in the summer, because you don't want excessive water in the summer, because that restricts the available habitat for ducks and other things to nest in.
Yeah.
But what you want to be able to do in the autumn is to raise the water level, because in the winter time you do want sheets of water. I mean, that's what attracted, last winter, 200 or 300 waterfowl out there. This winter, 30, 40 maximum, I suppose.
So
Because there just wasn't, we weren't able to put as much water out there in the winter as we were last year. So, what I would say is, the work needs to be done, but at this time of the year, ironically, we'll be looking at lowering the water level anyway, a bit. But in a minute, it's lowering itself without any control. There's a difference between just saying, oh, well, it's draining itself off anyway. You want to be able to control it.
yeah.
And at the moment, we can't control it well, because the water's just pouring out underneath.
Right. So in the sense of paying, it sounds like there's a level of urgency. You guys know how much we can go up to.
So there isn't any delegation for this committee currently. It's all for full council.
Yeah,
but if
full
I speak to Julian while I'm away, if we can get the information, that's really what he's going to have to do, is get the information, the quotes. Then they should actually put a report together. But it does depend on how quickly we can get the quotes.
So it might have to go straight to full council.
I think it should,
Yeah,
Yeah, we only do recommendations to full council, but we've got no delegation at the moment.
But we would give the information and the recommendation, possibly with an extraordinary meeting or direct.
Or you could do that if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Call an extraordinary meeting. Once you've got everything from Julian.
Yes. Let's wait and see what happens. We can do that.
And there's no voting on that.
No. Oh no. It's not to worry about. Right. Okay then. Thank you very much. Date time of next meeting, 4th of June 2025. And as we get nearer to that date, perhaps we can consider, obviously circulating amongst ourselves, whether actually meeting on site would be appropriate. But we'll leave it to
I think it might be to have a site meeting.
Yes.
It
Before
would
the
be
next
very
meeting.
useful,
Yeah.
very useful, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Even
Or a
if we
meeting
came back here
beforehand,
afterwards
yes.
and,
Yeah,
It's not
potentially.
really-
meeting there at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Put down the reserve.
yes,
Yeah.
4 o'clock at the reserve on the 4th of June. So provisionally, we can do that and then come back in. Yeah.